This podcast is sponsored by ebookit.com, self-publishing solutions for the independent author and small press. Visit us today at ebookit.com.
Welcome to the Toastmasters Podcast, the official podcast of Toastmasters International. Hello, everybody. This is Greg Gazin.
And I'm Ryan Levesque.
Ryan, these days more people are presenting virtually, and of course, contest season is coming up, and we have a perfect guest that might just help folks step up their game a notch or two.
Absolutely. Our guest today is distinguished Toastmaster Lindy MacLaine. She's the second runner-up in the 2020 first ever virtual World Championship of Public Speaking. Before joining Toastmasters, Lindy didn't even know there was such a thing as a World Championship of Public Speaking. Once introduced to this glittering goal, she became an avid competitor. She quickly discovered that the process of working on a contest speech substantially accelerated her journey towards speaking mastery. An additional shining contest benefit is the way her Toastmasters community grows every time she competes. Gaining new friends and fellow Toastmasters around the world delights her. Lindy's a proud member of the Sequim Toastmasters Club in Sequim, Washington, and current president of the Professionally Speaking Advanced Club out of Paulsbo, Washington. Lindy MacLaine, welcome to the Toastmasters Podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here with you.
Congratulations, second runner-up, first virtual competition. Loved your speech, your buried story. It almost sounds like it was your desire to share that buried story that also motivated you somewhat to enter the competition?
Well, that's absolutely true in this way. Actually, I had determined I would be in the competition that year, no matter what. In fact, I went so far in my visualizing as to cut a headshot of myself out and to paste it onto the Toastmasters magazine winner of the year before, Erin Beverly, so that I could imagine myself holding that trophy. It's quite amusing, actually. And no, it didn't end up being in Paris as I hoped, but I had wanted, if I got to that finals, to share that story with as many Toastmasters as possible. So I did have that in the back of my mind. It was so miraculous for me.
Interestingly, as we just shared in your bio, and of course what's connected us today, it is competing. However, that's not what initially attracted you to Toastmasters, was it, Lindy?
No, in fact, I came to Toastmasters seeking leadership skills. I had spent my entire career avoiding leadership positions, but at the same time wanting to be influential. I realized I had a conflict going on and I needed some leadership skills. And a friend of mine pointed me toward Toastmasters.
Obviously, you've benefited from the communications skills side of the Toastmasters experience. Did you find what you were looking for in terms of leadership?
I am finding it. I have to laugh at myself because my learning curve on leadership is so much slower and so much more arduous than my speaking. Speaking just comes more naturally to me. So yes, I've been a club officer since I joined. And each time I'm a club officer, I face new challenges and have to face new skill sets that need to grow within myself. The thing I like about Toastmasters is you can make all kinds of mistakes and nobody dies. So this is all good news.
That's a great point.
Was the speech competition your first foray into the online presentation world? And if so, what was the experience like?
It was my first foray into online presentation. It was kind of a gradual experience. The decision to move it online happened and then it was happening. But one of the things that happened was that the schedule for contests got dragged out a lot more. Things just got elongated. So there was a lot more time to practice in between contests than before. And I was fortunate to have a fellow club member, Judy Stein, who for a time she was also competing in the contest. So we would meet on Zoom and practice. And then once I was still going ahead and she was not, she continued to meet with me. So I had that accountability and I had a place to get immediate feedback that was extremely helpful. And besides her giving me feedback, I was able to give her feedback. And that helped me because I began to pick up things like when eye contact was working or not. And eye contact is a beast of another color working online than it is in person. By watching her, I learned things that I needed to do myself.
Absolutely, Lindy. And it's all about getting help and getting feedback to help us become better at virtual. And that's actually one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on our program. Recently, District 99, we had a Toastmasters Leadership Institute. You were the keynote educational presenter, and your presentation was called Becoming an Ace at Virtual Speaking. And I thought that was actually clever because you used the word ACE as an acronym. The first element of the acronym was the A, was the authenticity. And what I really found interesting is that you clearly stated that this was the goal when speaking on camera. What I am curious is, what did you mean by that? Because aren't we always striving for authenticity, regardless to the speech's purpose or delivery method?
Yes. When speaking on a stage, there's often a need to be larger than life for projection, for voice, for body language. You see that in plays and other kinds of in-person performance as well. But on camera, because of the camera's ability to do close-ups, any kind of inflated performance comes across as fakey. And when you watch your favorite actors on camera, you'll see that not only are their facial expressions and everything very, very natural, very authentic, but their voices are also. Sometimes I'll be doing the dishes in another room and listening to a movie, and I can always tell what great a movie it is by their voice, because it might sound rehearsed, for instance, if they're not as skilled. Otherwise, they sound like they're right there in the room speaking with you.
It seems like there's a fine balance to strike there because you want to use your voice well, you want to put the right emotion into it, and that takes some skill and some practice. On the other hand, you want to be real with your audience. That's what authenticity is about, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on how to strike that balance so that you don't go too far into the showmanship so as to seem inauthentic?
Like an actor, right?
Yeah.
One of the tools that Zoom offers, it's so easy by having a free account, is being able to record yourself. And of course, you could always record yourself before, but it was one of those things that I never quite got around to doing. This way, it's very, very easy to take a look. And then when you're watching it, I can hear my cat behind me and it's distracting me.
Yeah, I could hear.
So she has a little ritual. One of the things that I would say really is a hallmark of authentic presentation is that a person is what I would call in their body. And that's maybe language from theater. When you're working to be authentic, one of the things is rather than adding things, there's a lot more of needing to take things away, just to strip away habits that are getting in your way. For instance, tension in certain parts of your body. I used to have a habit of always raising my eyebrows. I thought it made me more expressive. It wasn't conscious, but what it did was it ended up blocking the natural expression of my emotion. The same with my hips. I tend to lock my hips. Every one of us has some kind of body habit that we've developed that really just kind of helps us to contain our emotion, which we mostly want for daily life. And when you're telling a story that's emotional, you want it to be able to flow through you with more ease and people to be able to see it more easily. Recently, I gave this workshop at a different club, and one of the club members was telling me that she has a very emotional poem that she wants to be able to perform. For her, one of the challenges is when she reads it aloud, it doesn't sound the way it does inside her head. She did read it, and so what I saw as I watched her reading it was that the emotion simply wasn't coming through for us. It was a poem that involved a lot of personal pain. And of course, getting to that level of emotion is not an easy thing. And when you're an actor and you're training as an actor, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. But whether you're using imagination or memory, you actually have to be living the imagined circumstance or reliving the real circumstance so that it's simply there in your body. You're not trying to manufacture it from anywhere.
Okay, so that makes sense. So you're talking about authenticity, and you've already nicely bridged into the second element of the acronym, which is the camera. And you're suggesting that regardless as to what you're going to do, you want to try to make sure that you record yourself ahead of time and then make sure that you look back. What can you suggest in terms of some do's and don'ts or some best practices with respect to using that camera?
One of the things you must do is get the camera up to eye level. Related to that, let me mention that I always encourage people to deliver standing. Now, I realize that people have different points of view about that, and I have seen people be very effective sitting. And when you're standing up, there's a whole different level of energy that's possible, a whole different level of credibility. By standing, you have to get your camera up to eye level. That includes stacking a lot of boxes usually. And if you have a large desktop, the way it appears on the screen is that someone's head is at the very bottom, and then there's all this space above their head till the top. So they actually have to find a way to be higher so that they're at the height of the camera. So it's really very individual, and this is why one of the reasons in my workshop, but I have people break out in pairs and work with each other to find where is that point that actually is eye contact. Because yes, it's looking at the camera, and I found that for some people it's about an inch below the camera, for others it's slightly above. So this is something that's important to confirm for your setup, exactly where you have to look so that the viewer gets the experience of eye contact. Not you as the speaker, but them as the listener.
Lindy, there's something else I noticed that you did particularly well in your presentation it's related to eye contact, but it goes further. And that has to do with the use of space, the use of the virtual stage. And the connection to eye contact is the way that you would sometimes come really up close to the camera. And as the viewer, I had the experience that you were looking right into my eyes and speaking directly to me. Can you share a little bit about your philosophy on use of space and what it is that you intend when you would go close to the camera as opposed to backing up or maybe moving side to side?
Absolutely. When you speak on stage, you are one to many. You have many people in your audience, and you're working to have eye contact with each of them, or, with different parts of the audience so that they all feel included. Working on camera, you are one-on-one with every audience member. It's as if you are sitting down with one person and speaking to that one person. And that experience of intimacy can actually be even more powerful than in person speaking because of the intimacy. There's just you and the speaker. Close-ups can be overused, but they are excellent for things like penetrating questions, for making confessions, for telling a secret, telling an aside. So these are reasons why you would approach the camera and speak directly to that person you're talking to. So that's what I use the close-ups for. Then I use my stage just like you do in a live performance, where you have different sides. And yes, it's only about 3 feet, but it's still on camera. Tell a chronological story. You can start at the viewer's left side and move toward their right to tell a chronological story. You can plant different scenes in different places. You can set different characters in different places, and by turning your head slightly, do dialogue effectively so that you can differentiate between when you're speaking to someone else and when you're speaking to the audience. So much is the same. I think the one element that's really different is the capacity for close-ups, and you don't want to miss using that. And that's another reason to be on your feet. It's more fluid when you're on your feet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking back to presentations at the club level or even competitions when you have a larger stage. What I find is many Toastmasters start by pretty much standing still. Then they start getting into the movement side to side, or even they have the past, the present, the future. Occasionally, as people get more experience, you'll see them sometimes step a little bit forward to talk to the audience. But I noticed with your presentation, and the same thing with Mike Carr's, where you came right up to that camera, I think that some people might feel uncomfortable. And I'm just wondering, is there a technique, is there something that you can use to be able to try to get used to doing that, for lack of a better term, backward or forward motion? For some people, it may not be very natural.
Well, I think what's uncomfortable, at least for me, is being that close to your own image and having your own face right there.
In high def.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if it's worse for women or not, but certainly I know every woman I know is extremely critical of herself, and having to see yourself on screen, it can be exhausting, overwhelming, uncomfortable, all those things. And I know I felt that way when we started being on Zoom, and it took me a lot of time to get used to. to seeing my own image. But one of the things I do, and again, this is different depending on who you are. Different people do not do this. But I always pin my own image when I'm presenting, as opposed to looking at gallery view, which can actually get in the way of doing eye contact right. By pinning my own image, I'm able to track and make sure that I'm not moving out of frame. But it also means that what I'm looking at is constant, because I'm sure you've had that experience on Zoom where you experience, I call them visual hijacks, where someone's speaking, but all of a sudden you're looking at someone else, whether that's because a microphone is on or I don't know why, but you've seen that, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And when you're speaking and that happens, it's really distracting. It can throw you off completely. So by pinning your own image, even if that hijacking is happening for other people, you will see one thing constantly. So at least that doesn't change. I remember back in the legacy program, in the icebreaker, one of the recommendations was to practice in the mirror. Well, this is like talking to yourself in the mirror in a way, although the point of eye contact is higher than your own eyes usually. So you're not actually looking at yourself, you've got yourself in the peripheral vision. So it's sort of a complicated answer for how to get used to doing it, but I think it's exposure. You have to do it until it doesn't hurt anymore, you know?
Okay, so unlike your icebreaker, you don't really look in the mirror. You can look at an image that you pin next to the camera. Thinking back to an icebreaker, and this is probably a perfect time to ask this, is that most people, when they do their icebreaker, would probably use notes. Now, of course, if you're speaking on a live stage, chances are that the speaker would not be using notes. Now, I know there really isn't any rule against it, but I would suspect that some may have some just because they can, particularly at the club level and even outside a contest, not just talking about contests.
Mm-hmm.
If someone does need to use notes, how would you suggest that they handle it? Because sometimes you see people have notes and you can tell they're staring at them.
I think having notes on screen is distracting because then people's eyes, they stop engaging with you. As a listener, you know they're not looking at you anymore. You feel the eye contact disrupted. One way, again, it depends on how briefly you can do your notes, but if you're able to use just a few words, is to put Post-it notes near the camera in slightly different spots so that you're not always looking at the same spot, but you're able to check your notes and go back to the eye contact. Again, this is just personal. I find it less distracting if a person actually looks down at a piece of paper when I'm watching them speak than if they look at the screen for notes. Because then I can at least see exactly what's going on as opposed to them just kind of spacing out on me, because that's the experience when you use on-screen notes, is that the speaker has checked out on you. So there's really no ironclad rule about it. This is just a personal preference.
Oh, fair enough.
Have you experienced something that works better? What do you do?
What I try to do is I'll have notes that are placed just below my camera, and what I'll do is I'll occasionally glance at them, but try not to be looking at them while I'm speaking. Just kind of glance down if I absolutely have to. Once I also had them on my wall because particularly when a situation was where I was asked to give a speech at a very short notice and there was a lot of information where it wasn't really easy to memorize it.
Mm-hmm. And your wall is close up.
Yeah, seems to work okay. Unfortunately, I do see sometimes people have like dual monitors. So what will happen is their camera will be on one. So maybe their laptop camera and their secondary monitor would be beside them. So I try to recommend against, if they have to, take that second monitor and actually put it behind, propped up where their laptop is, if they have to.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that where I suppose that the one monitor is where their audience is because they end up speaking to that instead of to the camera. And again, it destroys the experience of eye contact for the viewer.
I've seen that too, where the speaker's glued to the second monitor and you're like, we're over here. Hello.
Hey.
Or they're glued to it and you can tell they're laughing and you're talking about something serious. Obviously, they're doing something else.
That's true too, yeah.
With all of these things that we've been talking about, Lindy, I'm curious, what would you say, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, what's the biggest blunder that people do while making their presentations and how can they fix it?
I would say the camera not being at the right height and not making eye contact at the right spot is the thing that makes the biggest difference for me in elevating a speech. So if that's not working, then it automatically downgrades a person. The other thing that's more subtle that I often see, it has to do more with voice quality. And it's in this way that someone told me that actually as Toastmasters, we learn a certain rhythm of speaking, and I had been completely unaware of that. But once he said that and I started to be aware of it, I began to practice my speech in a way that wasn't always repeated with the same rhythm, the same intonation. I began to practice it so that I could speed up, I could slow down, I could just do it differently each time. And the thing that helps me the most to do that is I have a little picture, a 1 by 1 inch picture on my screen at the spot where my best eye contact point is, and I speak to her. It's two-dimensional, but when we speak to a face, the way we speak is completely different than when we are reciting something or when we are imagining an audience that's not really there. When you see a pair of eyes and a human face, it makes you respond differently. Honestly, even a little picture. First time I heard that, I heard it from Darren LaCroix, and I thought, that's ridiculous. But then I tried it, and it really does make an enormous difference for me.
Well, Darren lied down on stage. People thought that was ridiculous, but it got him a world championship.
It did, but that was before Zoom, was before on camera, and I have thought about that and realized, that's one thing he would have had to found a different way to map, because you can't see below probably the waist level. And so if he had fallen, that would have taken him completely out of frame. No, I would be really interested in how he would redo that should he have to do it virtually.
You'd probably have to have somebody slide a mattress really quick, propped up really, really high. I was speaking with someone the other day who was doing a dry run at a club for an upcoming competition. One of their comments was that some of the longer-term Toastmasters were having a little bit of a time with this whole virtual thing. And I think it was more than just the speaking part. So what I'm wondering is, some people might perceive that those who may be less experienced with technology might be at a disadvantage compared to those who might be more comfortable with it. What are your thoughts on that? And what would you say to someone who really would like to compete, but yet feels that they're a little bit afraid of the Zoom technology?
My home club responded so well to the shift to meeting online. We didn't miss a single meeting, and it wasn't because we were all comfortable with technology. We did have some members who were, and they helped the rest of us. One woman owns an extra webcam, and she loaned it out to someone who needed it, and we worked with each other to basically, it's like mentoring. That's what it was, to mentor how to get comfortable. Yeah. And then, of course, we're meeting every week, so you keep doing a thing and it gets more and more comfortable. Here, I live in this town that I live in. It's a retirement town. So most of us in our club are at least above 50, if not higher than that. And technology, I would say, is not generally our forte at large. I would say find someone who can help you. And let them come in with their mask and work together until you understand which buttons to push, where to look, any of those basic things. And then by practicing at your meeting, your comfort level will grow. I understand that change is hard. I totally understand that, because I struggle with change as well. But in this time, this is what we have. If you don't embrace it, then you're completely without the connection to your fellow Toastmasters or to the contest experience. It's worth embracing, and it's worth asking for help with if you're uncomfortable.
As you were saying that, I'm just thinking, if they're afraid of the technology, what about all the people that are already talking to their kids and their grandkids on Zoom? Geez, just think of it that way when you're doing your presentation.
True.
Yeah, it's a similar phenomenon. Well, Lindy, lots of solid practical tips here today that our listeners can start putting to use in their very next meeting. I'd really like to know, as we round off today's conversation, did you have these tips and strategies in your arsenal going into contest season last year? Are some of these things that you learned from the contest process, or maybe even as a result of having gone all the way up to the final stage of the World Championship?
You can't hear my head nodding up and down like mad, but absolutely, it was trial and error. And this is one of the things that I look forward to about this next contest season, is seeing how people take what we did and build on it, because I'm sure that there will be even higher levels of achievement in this environment this time around, because they have seen other people's mistakes, including ours, to build on. Absolutely, I learned as I went. There were a few things I knew I have trained in acting. I can't say that I've had a career in acting at all, but I have had the delight of getting to take acting classes, and including one on-camera class. So I was aware of the need to be more natural on camera. I was aware of the reality on camera of how close the camera actually is. Those scenes you see, of course this doesn't really apply to contests, but the scenes you see on movies where people are together, their faces are like next to each other. We never stand that close in real life, but that's what on camera is. So it's a whole different environment. So I had a little bit of a sense of how to be in that different environment. But things like learning that backgrounds can be so distracting, learning that light and the color of your background interact and do different things to how shiny you are or how clear you are. Those were all things that took practice, and looking at other people and saying, oh my goodness, what is that book behind them? Oh, hey, I have that poster. These are the thoughts. Or sometimes a guy will come wearing a t-shirt and you can see the top half of the design and you wonder, what does it say underneath that? So really, anything that distracts you as a viewer is something that takes you away from the speech. And it's really important to remove distractions, even so much for women, to not be wearing earrings, not be wearing a necklace, not be wearing anything that takes people's eyes away from your eyes. You want them to be glued to your eyes, because eyes are the center of emotional expression. And of course it follows elsewhere, but your eyes are where you want them looking.
Lindy, it sounds like you're becoming an ace at virtual speaking, which of course was the title of your presentation. Now, folks, you can Google becoming an ace at virtual speaking, but we will also include in the show notes a link to the handout that Lindy used. ACE, of course, is an acronym for authenticity, camera do's and don'ts, and eye contact. It's a little one-page summary that I think is very helpful in terms of some of the reminders. So, Lindy, as we wrap up, I'm just curious as to what you're up to next, and if somebody wants to reach you or get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way, I think, to find me probably is to message me on Facebook, and we can get connected that way. For you, Ryan, who have a daughter, any of you who have girls in your life who are age 8 to 12, or even up to 14 if they aren't too boy crazy yet, that I have a couple of books that are just awesome. If you like to read and like adventure, I have written 2 books. One's called The Curse of the Neverland. The next one is Becoming Piper Pan. And they're modern day Neverland sequels starring girls. So actually, women of any age tend to enjoy them if they like to read fantasy adventure. Those can both be found on Amazon.
Awesome.
Lindy MacLaine, thank you so much for joining us on the Toastmasters podcast today. It's been a lot of fun, and we wish you continued success.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Isn't it about time you published that book you've been thinking about? We can help with that. At ebookit.com, we've been providing authors and small presses with ebook publishing services since 2010. Visit us today at ebookit.com and let us know how we can help you.